Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we getting on? Welcome to a brand new Fallout 76 video. In December, the Gleaming Depths update will be arriving in the game, and there's a really long list of stuff that is coming with this update, and changes and things that are being added and modified. It's quite nuanced and complex, so today we're going to have a look at 5 things that will be changing or added that have either not been talked about a great deal or need a little bit of expansion on, including, amongst other things, some interesting looking weapon changes that we will talk about in just a minute. So let's dive into this. First up is accessibility controls. So accessibility is something that both Bethesda and Xbox more generally have been working on and improving and putting a lot of time and effort into over the last little while and are continuing to do going forward, which is always really good to see. There's some stuff in here which potentially leads into stuff that I think players have been asking for a long time, so there might be some interesting stuff in the future, maybe, as well as some really cool little features for those who need a little bit of extra help when playing the game. So when you log in after the update, one of the first things you will see is a pop-up talking about the new accessibility features, basically allowing you to set these controls as soon as you log into the game, or at least into a world anyway. I can't actually show you that at the moment, as I didn't know it was there, so it kind of popped up and went away before I could do it. However, once you go into the map and the menu on the map, you can then access the new accessibility settings via there and take a look at the list of stuff. Some of this stuff, for example, there's music and subtitles and stuff like that, are just duplicates of controls that are found elsewhere in the settings, just kind of consolidated into an easy place to find them. But there's some new stuff as well. So for example, we have speech to text, which will allow communication from other players who are using voice chat to be converted into text for those who are perhaps having difficulty hearing it and would rather read what people are saying than listen to it. So that's an option there. We have basically the opposite, which is text-to-speech, so you'll be able to type into a new message window if you set this up, and have the game convert that into speech for other players to hear. And you can choose whether it's a male or a female voice that they're going to hear, and make some adjustments to that as well. So yeah, this is an interesting one. One thing that's not listed here, and that this might imply possibly appearing in the future, maybe, is that just a straight up text box, because the foundation is there with text-to-speech to have a text-to-text, I suppose, method of communication, which players have been asking for since the beginning of the game, and still hasn't happened. Personally, I still think it's an invitation to get shot while you're typing, but, you know, this is kind of the same as well. But for those who find that a more useful approach to communicate with people, it's a good little addition, and who knows, maybe something that will be expanded on in future. Screen narration, so emotes will be narrated out to players, so they'll be able to understand them a little more easily if that's what you want. Might also be useful if somebody's standing behind you when they're emoting, for example, and you just can't see them. So potentially a useful one, although the example here has me a little bit confused, because it says player, in square brackets, as in the player name will go in there, wants to team up, for example. Okay, fair enough. How the screen narration is going to manage with some really weird screen names out there, I don't know. I think you might get some really funny misinterpretations coming up, or just straight up confusion, but I guess we'll see. An interesting thing, I assume they're using AI for it, but yeah, nonetheless, narration for emotes and things like that. And there's also a number of different UI options if you want to change how you control the UI depending on what works best for you. So this is stuff that, again, is primarily an accessibility setup. There's a whole bunch of stuff on there that, for example, I use, things like turning off the explosions and things like that, and screen shake and stuff. So there's a whole load of stuff that you might want to look into, even if you wouldn't normally dive into accessibility controls. Jumping back another direction, camp pets. We've already touched on this one around about the time that Bethesda confirmed this was happening. Pets will be arriving for your camp in December, which is really cool. I think this is probably my favourite feature of this whole update, to be honest. Definitely one of the fun ones. So basically, the way this is going to work, we now have details and confirmation on. The Allies tab in your build menu is changing. It'll now be called the Dwellers tab. You'll be able to have one camp ally, like we already do, and one pet, so one of each. I was concerned previously, because they're in the same tab, that you might be able to have one or the other, and they might cancel each other out. But that's not going to be the case. You'll be able to have one of each. So that's really cool. My concern basically came from the idea that the number of actors in the game world will impact the performance of the server, and it increases the amount of work that it has to do, so that might be players, although to a lesser degree, also NPCs and enemies and allies and pets and every other creature that might be wandering around. All of this is increased server load. Obviously, technology has come on over the last 15 years or so, plus the servers have got more and more stable over the course of 76's lifetime, so obviously the devs feel like the additional load will not be a problem. So yeah, that's cool. Nice that we're going to be able to have 2 creatures, beings, or whatever you want to say, walking around our camps. And obviously right now we're starting off with 2 cat options and 2 dog options, but it's sufficiently open-ended that I have no doubt that Bethesda will add more options on down the line. I quite like the idea of having a Liberator pet walking around my camp. I think that will be fun. Basically, these are going to be not exactly cosmetic, but kind of creatures. They'll walk around, you'll be able to give them commands like sit, or you'll be able to speak to them, which I suspect is how you'll access them giving you random bits and pieces, because they're supposed to collect stuff for you, give you presents. A bit like cat owners will be very, very familiar with this idea, I am absolutely sure. Hopefully these cats will bring you things that are slightly more desirable, though. And you can also pet your pets, which, you know, we'd riot if you couldn't. I do have a couple of little gripes, as it currently stands on the PTS, so this is very conditional because it's on the PTS. Firstly, the current animation for petting your pets is pretty terrible in first person. It's a really awkward extending of the hand and patting in front of you that may or may not be anywhere actually near the pet. And I realise that's probably difficult to pull off, especially with the way things are set up, but it doesn't look great. Worse yet is if you go into third person, the petting animation does not play at all at the moment. Whether or not that's going to change, you know, test server and all that, or it's just something that won't work because of the extended camera position, or it just always looks bad, I don't know. We'll have to see what happens over the life of the test server. There's still a couple of months to go yet. So that's a bit odd, but that animation is not particularly great for right now. One other option is that you'll be able to dress up your pets. There's a customize option when you interact with them, and a bit like putting different outfits on your camp allies, you'll be able to do the same thing with pets. The way this I would expect to work is that it would present you with the things in your stash box or on your person that can be equipped on the creature, available as a list, and then you pick from them and equip. Right now, the only thing that was coming up for me was a military hat, so a beret, which didn't work. I tried to put a bandana on a dog, it just wasn't having it. I don't know what's going on, this is probably something they're working on during the test server, but for right now, that particular functionality is not working on the PTS, which is a bit unfortunate because it could be kind of fun, and I'd be interested to see which direction they take it, and whether or not unique sort of outfits and stuff like that for your pets might be something that gets added into the game and is available to either collect or whatever. Possibly on the scoreboards, season rewards, that sort of thing, I think is likely on down the line. But for right now, it's just not really working. So hopefully they get that sorted somewhere in the next couple of months. So, moving on back to a gameplay element that's changing, adjustments to explosion visual effects. Now, this I am very, very happy to see, mostly, but they've left out something important. So the gist of this is it's a purely visual change designed to reduce the blinding effect of explosions from things like the Fat Man, or missile launchers, or grenades, and varying other things. There's quite a long list of things that have been changed. This is not supposed to, with one exception as far as I'm aware, change how they actually function in terms of the damage and stuff. Nuka grenades and nuka quantum grenades are having their explosion radius tweaked a little bit to differentiate them from each other, but everything else is just a visual change. There are some choices in here that are not really high priority in my opinion. Baseball grenade leaps out at me. Cryo arrow. These are not particularly problematic visual effects. Some of the other stuff, like say the Fat Man, yeah, that's good to see. So this also will affect NPC weapons that use explosive effects, so that's helpful as well, and environmental effects like exploding cars and the like. Unfortunately, what they seem to have left out on this change is the thing that I have the biggest issue with as regards explosion effects, and that is the Chromator. I absolutely loathe that damn thing. It is the primary, not the only, but the primary reason why I'm not playing adventure mode at all at the moment. I'm just using private worlds, because I don't want to be around players using a Chromator because it completely spoils the experience for me. Unfortunately, the Chromator is not touched by any of these changes, so that will continue to be just as bad as it ever was, except for the fact it's actually getting slightly worse, because, as we'll touch on again in a minute, there is an AP reduction coming in for the Chromator, so players are going to be able to fire it off even more often, so that's actually going to make it worse. Most of this is great, but the Chromator, unfortunately, not included and actually getting worse. You know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back or something. But that's where we are on that. Not being blinded quite so much is definitely a nice change. It just doesn't go as far as I would like it to. Player titles. This is a weird one. It's something that's quite common in other games, particularly MMO-type games. As you complete certain objectives, certain quest lines, things like that, you gain a title that you can attach to your character that will appear beside your name for you and other players to see. So to engage with this, you bring up your Pip-Boy, go over to the far left, and the thing that has your stats and collections and all of that stuff and current effects, and just move that particular tab all the way across to where we have prefixes and suffixes. So you've got 2 lists there, you can pick 1 prefix, 1 suffix, and that will combine to make a new title. Quite cool. Actually, more flexible than a lot of games do. I quite like this idea. It's no game changer, let's be honest. But it's a fun little thing that acknowledges the content you've engaged with and completed in the past, so I think that's quite cool. It's a relatively simple little UI update in the grand scheme of things. There's a couple of things that do need moving around on this list. There's some stuff in the suffixes in particular that I noticed that would probably work better as a prefix, and hopefully it'll get expanded on in the future. I imagine it will. This also works retroactively, which is quite nice too, so any quests that you completed way back when, you should still get the appropriate title upon logging in after the update, without any issues, hopefully. Fingers crossed. But yeah, a nice to have. There's actually an interesting tidbit here, which funnily enough, this kind of system is exactly where my channel name comes from. Back in the day, I used to play Star Wars The Old Republic. I was playing a Sith sorcerer, whose technically his name was just Xion with an X. And as he went through the game, he started out as an acolyte, became an apprentice, a Sith Lord, and a Darth, and so on. And you'd acquire the title to attach to your character's name as you went on. That's essentially where the channel name came from, for those who are interested in such things. Anyway, moving on, last thing to talk about on this list is some changes to weapon damage and AP cost. Now I'm going to avoid going on too long a rant about this. This is mostly buffs in a game that desperately needs nerfs, as it is nowhere near hard enough as it is, and most of this patch is making players way more powerful when in fact they're already far too powerful as it is, and the game severely lacks any challenge. And yes, I know the new raids are supposed to be challenging, but one tiny little section event piece of content does not impact the rest of the game. And I know other people feel the other way about it, but I wildly disagree. Some of these changes, however, are actually quite positive. They are focusing on weapons that definitely do need a buff because they are borderline useless, and you definitely can't build a character around them, which is nice. That being said, I don't think that most of these changes are actually going far enough to make these weapons viable. So for example, the 10mm pistol is getting buff. Great, 10mm pistols are actually quite a cool weapon, I like them. They are nowhere near effective enough to keep using though, and I don't think a 3-point damage buff or whatever it is going to be sufficient to make them a viable weapon. The 44 revolver is slow, clunky and heavy to use, for example. The damage buff is nice, but still not going to make it feel good, I don't think. Same could be said for the black powder, pistol and rifles as well. There's stuff for bows and shotguns that are getting tweaked to make those more viable. Hopefully that will help. Some of them are bigger jumps. The double-barrel shotgun, for example, has got a relatively sizable improvement on it, and some of the others as well. There's improvements to pipe weapons as well, but I don't suppose those are about to become viable either. It's a pity, really. Pipe guns are kind of fun. It makes sense that they're not viable as an endgame weapon, but at the same time, they're a kind of unique thing that you don't see elsewhere too much, so it'd be nice to see them more used, I think. Anyway, there's one note here that I would point out, and that is that Cold Shoulder, where everything else is listed as getting a damage increase, for some reason appears to be getting a damage decrease, a nerf. Not sure if that's actually what's happening, or if it's getting a buff, and this is a typo. I don't know where the damage stats on it are right now, and I can kind of see a case for each of these things, a buff and a nerf. Looking at the double-barrel shotgun's current stats, I'm guessing it's getting a buff, but I don't know, it's probably a typo. So I thought I'd just draw attention to that one, something to keep an eye out on. But yeah, on the whole, these are underpowered weapons that don't get used, they're getting a buff, just most of them probably don't go far enough. There are changes to beta wave tuners and gamma wave emitters for laser and plasma weapons that are coming in. For the most part, this is a nerf because they went further than intended on fire damage specifically. To be honest, I think most of these weapons are still underpowered compared to other weapons, I should say. So I still think there's work to be done here, but okay, these are changes to be aware of. And there's a whole load of AP cost reductions that are coming in that will basically mean certain weapons can be fired more often if you are a VATS user, and there's a fairly extensive list on that. As mentioned before, one of the weapons that is getting this change is the Chromator, and yeah, that weapon is already absurd and really does not need a buff. It needs, well, actually it needs removing from the game altogether, but anyway, very, very strange decisions. Still, there we go. Lots and lots of changes that are maybe not being addressed in quite so much detail that hopefully will be interesting to find out about. As, yeah, some weapons getting buffs that need them, some weapons getting buffs that definitely don't need them. Some good changes, some bad changes, and some fun new features coming in here. The accessibility stuff is particularly nice for those who need it, which is always good. We like to see that sort of thing. Player titles, not the most exciting thing, but again, a nice little nice to have. Kind of the same with pets, really, but they'll add a little bit more life to our camps, which should be good as well. Definitely looking forward to engaging with a bunch of that. And hopefully, we won't be getting quite so blinded going forward either, once these things come together. There we go. Hope you guys found that useful and informative. If you did, please do consider dropping subs and likes. I very much appreciate. Down below, we've got social media links and channel memberships if you want to support the channel that way. Make sure you're hitting that notification bell as well. I really appreciate all that stuff. Massively helps out. And join us for live streams as well if you get the chance. We've got a whole load of different stuff on the go at the moment, so lots of stuff to jump into there. I hope you'll join us for that. But for now, thank you very much for watching. I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon.